the autumn sun barely broke through the gray clouds when Emma once again counted the money in her worn wallet. $320 until payday, and that was still a full 7 days away. She mentally reviewed the upcoming expenses: bread, milk, transit passes for work, and realized with bitterness that she'd have to borrow from her neighbor again. "Emma, you ready?" came David's voice from the hallway. "Let's go to Mom's. She's already called 3 times asking when we'll arrive." Emma sighed, closed her wallet, and headed toward her husband. David stood by the mirror, adjusting his shirt collar, and in his eyes she saw that special expression of caring anxiety that always appeared when it came to Patricia Anderson. "David," she began cautiously, "maybe we shouldn't buy an expensive cake? Let's get something simpler." Her husband turned to her with mild surprise. "Em, come on. Mom loves good cakes, and she has no money for such luxuries. We can't show up empty-handed to see family." In his voice was that soft but unshakable conviction that always arose when it concerned his mother. Emma nodded, though inside she felt that familiar sense of helplessness. She silently pulled on her jacket and followed her husband to the car. As they drove through familiar streets, David talked about work, about a new project, about how management was delaying bonuses again. Emma nodded and made agreeing sounds, but her thoughts were occupied with something entirely different. In her head, numbers involuntarily spun those same numbers she tried hard not to notice every month, but which inexorably added up to frightening sums: $2,500. David faithfully transferred that amount to his mother every month for utilities bills. As he explained, another $1,000 each week went to grocery packages he drove to Patricia. And besides that, urgent needs regularly arose. Medications got more expensive, the washing machine broke, there was a sudden need to pay for some medical procedures. "Last week we gave your mother $2,500, Emma mentally calculated, plus groceries for $400. Plus, the day before yesterday, she asked for another $500 for urgent needs. Total for the week, $3,400. And that's more than half of David's salary. "Emma, are you listening to me?" Her husband's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "Yes, of course," she hastily replied. "You were talking about the new project. I'm asking what cake we should buy. See that supermarket? Let's stop here." Emma looked at the familiar sign of the local supermarket, located 2 blocks from her mother-in-law's house. It was an ordinary chain store with a typical selection of goods, and not too high prices, exactly the place where an average middle-class family shops. "Of course," she agreed, though she continued hoping in her heart that she could convince her husband to take a cheaper cake. Inside the store smelled of fresh baking, and something else, that special scent of grocery abundance that always made Emma feel more acutely the limitations of their own budget. They headed to the bakery section, where cakes of all sizes and price categories gleamed behind the glass display. "This one's good." David pointed to an impressive cake with cream roses. "Mom loves the classics." Emma looked at the price tag and almost choked. $100 for a cake, while in their refrigerator lay only bread and leftovers from yesterday's soup. "David," she began carefully, "maybe this one?" She pointed to a smaller cake costing $60. "It's also very beautiful." Her husband gently but insistently objected. "You know how Mom appreciates when people come with nice treats. She doesn't have money for such things herself. Her pension is tiny. We can't skimp on family." And again that unshakable certainty in his voice, before which Emma felt petty and stingy. She nodded and silently followed her husband to the checkout. The line moved slowly, and Emma inadvertently listened to the conversation the cashier was having with the previous customer. A middle-aged woman with lively, attentive eyes and a welcoming smile, clearly one of those people who knew how to find common ground with every visitor. "Are you David's wife?" The cashier suddenly addressed Emma when their turn came. "I recognized you from the photo on his phone. He's such a caring son, comes every week, buys groceries for his mom." Emma looked in surprise at the woman's name tag, Tamara Wilson. Evidently one of those chatty retail workers who knew all the regular customers by sight and remembered their family circumstances. "Yes," Emma answered uncertainly. "We're just heading to visit her." "Wonderful," Tamara began scanning the cake. "And your mother, by the way, is also one of our regular customers, though she doesn't come alone." Some special note sounded in the cashier's voice, and Emma involuntarily tensed. "What do you mean, not alone?" she asked. "Well, with her gentleman friend," Tamara explained quite naturally, as if talking about the most ordinary thing. They come every Wednesday. Such a beautiful couple. And he's very generous, by the way. Something inside Emma trembled. A gentleman friend? Patricia Anderson? The same Patricia Anderson who began every phone conversation with complaints about loneliness and about how she had no one in the world except her son? Excuse me. Emma tried to maintain a calm tone. You must be confusing her with someone else. Oh no, not at all. Tamara shook her head. I know them well. Patricia Anderson, a tall woman, gray hair, always very elegantly dressed. And with her is a distinguished gentleman, about 60. Wealthy, you can tell right away. The cashier leaned closer and lowered her voice to a confidential whisper. They always buy the most expensive things. Red caviar by the jar, premium cheeses, good cognac. He pays with a card, a gold one. And he gives tips too. They leave $1,000 tips. I've gotten used to it. I wait for them every Wednesday. Emma felt the ground disappear from under her feet. Red caviar, premium cheeses. She and David had last bought caviar for New Year's, and even then, the cheapest kind. And here they were, talking about jars of red caviar and $1,000 tips. Maybe it's not her, Emma weakly objected, though in her heart she already understood the cashier wasn't mistaken. Come on, Tamara waved her hand. I know you're David. He's told me about his mom. Patricia Anderson lives at 245 Maple Street, house number 15. Emma's heart beat so loudly it seemed audible throughout the store. Patricia Anderson, 245 Maple Street, house 15. That was indeed her mother-in-law's address. $100, the cashier announced, returning to her professional duties. Emma mechanically held out the money, but her hands were shaking. Only one thing spun in her head: red caviar, premium cheeses, $1,000 tips. And at home, her mother-in-law complained she didn't have money for cottage cheese. Thanks for your purchase, Tamara said cheerfully. Give my regards to your mother. Emma took the bag with the cake and headed toward the exit, feeling as if she were walking in a dream. David walked beside her, saying something, but his words reached her as if through cotton. Emma, where are you going? Her husband called. The car's the other way. She stopped and looked around in confusion. Indeed, why had she walked not toward the parking lot but toward the service entrance? Sorry, she mumbled. I need the restroom. Wait in the car. I'll be quick. David nodded and headed to the car, while Emma, not understanding why herself, went out through the service entrance to a small utility yard behind the store. Dumpsters stood here, empty boxes lay about, and it smelled of something sour and unpleasant, but Emma didn't notice. She leaned her back against the concrete wall and tried to organize her thoughts. Her mother-in-law had a gentleman friend. Every Wednesday, expensive purchases, $1,000 tips. And at home, tears on the phone about how hard it was to live as a lone pensioner, how there wasn't enough money even for basic necessities. Suddenly, Emma heard voices. Someone was approaching the service entrance. She instinctively stepped back behind the dumpsters, not wanting to explain her strange behavior to strangers. Val, darling, are you sure we should buy groceries here? Came a male voice, pleasant, with well-cultivated diction. I can take you to any store downtown. Tony dear, replied a female voice, and Emma felt her hair stand on end because she would recognize this voice out of thousands. The selection is good here, and the cashier knows me. I don't like when they try to cheat you in new places. Emma carefully peeked out from behind the dumpster and saw what made her grab the wall to keep from falling. Two people walked across the yard. A man of about 60 in an expensive dark coat, with a cane in hand and a gold watch on his wrist. Next to him, a woman in a mink coat Emma had never seen, with a professional hairstyle and makeup clearly done at an expensive beauty salon. But Emma knew this woman's face as well as her own. Patricia Anderson, her mother-in-law, the same Patricia Anderson, who just yesterday on the phone complained she couldn't afford to buy good meat because her pension was small. Listen, darling, the man continued, carefully holding his companion's arm. Maybe we should go to my place after all? Everything's there, and you won't have to cook. No, Tony, Patricia gently but firmly objected, and in her voice there wasn't a shadow of that elderly weakness Emma had grown accustomed to hearing in phone conversations. My son and daughter-in-law might come by. I wouldn't want them to find out about us. I understand, the man nodded. Family relationships are delicate matters. Well then, let's buy groceries and go. They headed to the main entrance, and Emma watched them go, feeling everything inside turning over. A mink coat, gold jewelry, professional makeup. This outfit cost more than she and David earned in 6 months. And all this on a woman who every week asked her son for money for basic necessities. Emma took out her phone and checked the time. 2:30. In an hour they were supposed to be at her mother-in-law's, but her mother-in-law was here now with an unknown man, buying expensive groceries and clearly not planning to meet them. As if in a fog, Emma returned to the car. David sat behind the wheel, scrolling through something on his phone and whistling a tune, a sure sign of good mood. "There you are," he exclaimed happily. "I was starting to think you got lost. Let's go to Mom's." "Yes," Emma answered mechanically, getting in the car. "Let's go." The entire drive she remained silent, staring out the window and trying to make sense of what she'd seen. David, accustomed to her quietness, paid no attention to her condition and cheerfully talked about how happy his mother would be at their visit. "Mom sees people so rarely," he said, parking the car at the familiar building. "Our visit is a real celebration for her, especially with such a beautiful cake." They went up to the 4th floor and rang the familiar doorbell. No one answered. David frowned in surprise and rang again. "Strange," he muttered. "Mom's always home at this time, especially when she knows we're coming." "Maybe she's at the clinic," Emma suggested, though she knew perfectly well where her mother-in-law was now. They went back downstairs and sat on a bench by the entrance to wait. David was nervous, calling his mother's cell, but the phone was off. "Probably died," he explained. "Mom often forgets to charge it." Time dragged painfully slowly. Emma sat next to her husband and thought about what was happening now in the store. Patricia, with her gentleman friend, were buying red caviar and premium cognac, and in an hour she'd be complaining about not having money for bread. Finally, around 4 o'clock, a familiar figure approached the building Patricia Anderson. But how different she was. No mink coat, no professional makeup. An old coat, a worn purse, a tired expression on her face, as if in an hour she'd aged 10 years. "David, sweetheart," she exclaimed, seeing her son. "How long have you been waiting? I was at the clinic. Such a terrible line. I barely got through." Emma looked carefully at her mother-in-law. Her lipstick was carefully retouched. Her hair didn't look disheveled, as it would after a long wait in a stuffy clinic. Moreover, she faintly smelled of expensive perfume, the same kind Emma had never sensed on her before. "Mom, we were worried." David hugged his mother. "Your phone didn't answer." "Oh, it died probably." Patricia waved her hand. "Well, come upstairs. Let's have tea." In the apartment, everything was, as usual, modest, neat, with that special atmosphere of loneliness that always made David feel guilty toward his mother. Patricia bustled around the stove, put on the kettle, took out the best cups. "David, what a beautiful cake!" she exclaimed, seeing the box. "Must have been expensive. You shouldn't have spent so much. I have cookies anyway." "Mom, come on," David objected. "Nothing's too good for you." Emma sat at the table and observed this performance, feeling an incomprehensible mixture of anger, confusion, and some painful curiosity growing inside her. Who was this man? Where did her mother-in-law get money for a mink coat? And most importantly, why all this deception? "Emma, you're so quiet," Patricia noticed. "Maybe you don't feel well." "No, everything's fine," Emma answered, trying to make her voice sound natural. "Just tired from work." "And your job is still the same?" her mother-in-law continued questioning. "At that little firm?" A barely noticeable note of disdain sounded in the question, which Emma felt especially keenly after today's discovery. "Yes, the same," she answered dryly. "That's too bad," Patricia sighed. "David needs a wife who earns well. Otherwise, look how hard it is for you helping me and barely making ends meet yourselves." Emma felt her cheeks burning with shame and anger. The same woman who an hour ago had been buying red caviar with some rich man was now lecturing her about how hard it was to help a poor mother-in-law. The rest of the visit passed in a fog. David told his mother the news. Patricia complained about her health and loneliness, while Emma silently drank tea and thought about how her life had just been turned upside down. When they finally prepared to leave, her mother-in-law hugged her son goodbye. "David, you're my only one," she said with tears in her voice. "If not for you, I'd be completely lost. Such a small pension, prices rising, and more ailments all the time." "Mom, don't say that." David was moved. "I'll always take care of you." Emma stood nearby and listened to this conversation, feeling something inside her finally breaking. A lie. Everything her mother-in-law said was a lie. And this lie was destroying their family. taking away their ability to live normally, to make plans, to dream about the future. In the car, David was unusually animated. "Did you see how happy Mom was at our visit? She sees so little joy in life. It's good we can support her at least a little." Emma nodded and looked out the window, while one single thought spun in her head. What should she do with this terrible knowledge? Tell her husband what she'd seen. But would he believe her? And what would happen if he did? Their family might fall apart. Or maybe it was better to stay silent and try to forget. But how could you forget something that crossed out your whole life? How could you stay silent when every penny they gave her mother-in-law cost them so dearly? All the way home, Emma was tormented by these questions. And with each minute, it became clearer that there was no going back. Now that she knew the truth, everything had changed forever. And sooner or later, she'd have to decide what to do with this knowledge that lay like a heavy stone on her heart. Emma lay in bed staring at the ceiling, where moonlight drew whimsical patterns through the imperfectly drawn curtains. Nearby, David peacefully snored, occasionally muttering something in his sleep, but she couldn't close her eyes. In her head, like an obsessive melody, the same thoughts spun, the same numbers, the same images. Patricia Anderson in a mink coat, gold jewelry, red caviar, $1,000 tips, and those same hands extended to her son for another handout. Those same eyes full of grateful tears for pennies the family scraped from their last money. Emma turned on her side and began to count. Over the last 6 months, from May through October, they'd given her mother-in-law about $28,000. Monthly transfers of $2,500. Weekly grocery packages at $400. Urgent needs, 2 to 3 times a month of $500 each. With this money, they could have bought a used car or done repairs in their apartment or gone on a vacation abroad for the first time in their lives. Instead, they lived in poverty the last week of every month, borrowed from neighbors for transit passes, bought the cheapest food. And her mother-in-law at this time dined in restaurants with a rich lover and bought premium cognac. Emma clenched her fists under the blanket. She wanted to scream from fury and helplessness, wanted to wake her husband and tell him everything she'd seen. But fear was stronger than anger. Fear of destroying the family. Fear that David wouldn't believe her. Fear that the truth would turn out even worse than she supposed. In the morning, Emma got up with eyes red from sleeplessness and a heavy head. David was already fussing in the kitchen, making breakfast and humming something, a sure sign of good mood. "Good morning, sunshine," he greeted his wife. "How'd you sleep?" "Fine," Emma lied, pouring herself coffee. "And you? You're so cheerful." "Yeah. Yesterday we had such a nice time at Mom's. Did you see how happy she was about the cake? And in general, I think she looks better than before. Maybe she's finally getting used to loneliness, learning to enjoy little things." Emma almost choked on her coffee. Getting used to loneliness, learning to enjoy little things. Yes, she dined yesterday with her lover at a restaurant for $1,500. The phone rang at 9:30 in the morning. Patricia's name lit up on the screen. "David, dear," came her voice in the receiver, and Emma immediately noticed the familiar sad notes in it. "Son, sorry to call so early." "Mom, what happened?" David asked worriedly. "Well, I have trouble." Her mother-in-law's voice trembled with barely restrained tears. "I'm out of heart medication, and it's so expensive, $320 for a pack. My pension isn't enough, and without the medicine, I'll just die. I have such arrhythmia." Emma watched her husband's face and saw how it changed. First worry, then compassion, then determination. "Mom, come on," David exclaimed. "Of course I'll transfer the money now. Don't worry, everything will be fine." "David, I know it's hard for you," Patricia continued crying into the phone. "But I can't go without medicine. My heart is very bad." "Mom, don't talk nonsense," her son interrupted. "No money is too much for you. I'll do it right now." He hung up and immediately opened the banking app on his phone. "David," Emma began carefully, "maybe there are cheaper alternatives. Often the same medication is sold under different names." David looked at her in surprise. "Emma, this is Mom. You can't skimp on a family member's health. What's so special about $300? "Nothing special," Emma answered quietly, though inside she was screaming. "Special is that we don't have that money ourselves. Special is that we eat the last pasta while she buys red caviar." The transfer was made in 5 minutes. $320 flew from the account, leaving their pitiful remnants until payday. "There you go, Mom," David reported on the phone. "The money came through. Go to the pharmacy right away." "David, you're my savior," Patricia sobbed. What would I do without you? Such a caring son I have, not like others. After breakfast, Emma asked to go to the store, supposedly for bread, but really to check medication prices. At the nearby pharmacy, she found the exact drug her mother-in-law urgently needed. Indeed, the original imported one cost $320, but next to it, on the shelf, stood a domestic equivalent with the same active ingredient for $18. Miss, Emma addressed the pharmacist, are these medications the same in effect? Yes, of course, she confirmed. Ours is no worse, just cheaper. Many pensioners buy exactly this one. Emma left the pharmacy with a heavy heart. So they could have gotten by with $18 instead of $320. But Patricia, of course, didn't mention that. Why economize when a loving son pays? On Monday at work, Emma couldn't concentrate on numbers and reports. She took out a notebook and began compiling a detailed table of all expenses on her mother-in-law over recent months. A terrible picture emerged. Monthly transfers $2,500. Groceries every week averaging $400, meaning $1,600 per month. Urgent needs arising 2 to 3 times a month, another $800. Medications about $1,000 per month. Total came to almost $6,000 every month. That was practically David's entire salary. They lived on Emma's one salary of $3,000, while her mother-in-law received twice as much from them. My God, Emma whispered, looking at the numbers. We support her better than ourselves. Her colleague at the next desk, Marina, noticed her condition. Emma, you're not yourself today. Problems? Yeah, family stuff, Emma answered evasively. Tell me, how much do you think a pensioner needs for a normal life? Marina thought. Well, $2,000 to $2,500 would definitely be enough for everything. Utilities, groceries, medicines, even something left for entertainment. Why is your mother-in-law asking for money again? Uh-huh, Emma nodded. Every month, more and more. Listen, maybe she's not as poor as she seems, Marina suggested. My aunt did the same thing, complained about poverty, but actually rented out 3 apartments. Just got used to the kids supporting her. Emma shuddered. Marina had hit the nail on the head without even knowing it. That evening at home, there was a conversation Emma feared but knew was inevitable. David came home tired and immediately brought up his mother. Mom called, thanked me for the medicine, says she already feels better. David, Emma began carefully, doesn't it seem like your mom has been asking for money too often? Her husband looked at her in surprise. What's wrong? She has a bunch of ailments. Her pension is tiny, prices constantly rising. We can't abandon family. I'm not saying abandon. Emma chose her words carefully. But look, $6,000 a month is a lot even for a sick person. $6,000? David frowned. Where'd you get that number? Emma took out her notebook with calculations. Look, we transfer $2,500 every month, plus groceries every week. That's another $1,600. Plus urgent needs that come up 2 or 3 times a month. Plus medicines. In total, it comes to about $6,000. David took the notebook, studied the entries, and frowned even more. So what? She's my mother, and I have to take care of her. David, that's more than your salary. Emma couldn't hold back. We live on my one salary, while yours goes entirely to your mom. And what's wrong with that? Her husband raised his voice. She raised me alone, spent her whole life on me, didn't remarry so she wouldn't impose a stepfather on me. Now it's my turn to take care of her. But maybe we should figure out exactly where the money goes, Emma insisted. $6,000 is a lot. What are you suggesting? Interrogate her. David got angry. Demand receipts for every purchase? Check if she's really sick? That's humiliating. I didn't mean that. Then what did you mean? David stood up and began pacing the room. That my mother's lying? That she's pretending to be sick? That she's extorting money from us? Emma felt everything inside compress. David had hit the target precisely without even knowing it. That's exactly what she wanted to say, but couldn't. Not without proof. No, of course not, she answered quietly. I just think we could find ways to economize. Economize on my mother's health? David looked at her with such disappointment that Emma felt like the lowest person. Emma, I don't recognize you. You used to understand the importance of family values. They spent the rest of the evening in tense silence. David demonstratively watched TV while Emma washed dishes and thought about how naive she'd been, thinking her husband would easily believe her suspicions. For him, his mother was sacred. and any doubts about her honesty were perceived as a personal insult. On Tuesday evening, Patricia called again. This time, her voice was especially sad and plaintive. "David, dear, forgive me for bothering you again." "Mom, what happened?" her son immediately responded. "Well, the utility bill came, and I don't have enough money," her mother-in-law sobbed. "They want $800, and I only have half. I don't know what to do." "Mom, don't worry." David immediately calmed her. "I'll transfer it now." "Son, I understand it's hard for you." Patricia continued crying. "But where can I go? They'll cut off the electricity, the heat. I won't survive winter without heat." "Mom, what are you saying?" David protested. "Of course I'll transfer it. And don't worry like that anymore. $800. Another $800 on top of everything else." Emma sat nearby and listened to this conversation, feeling fury boil inside her. $800 for utilities per month. Yes, they themselves paid $400 for a 2-bedroom apartment, and here a 1-bedroom for a pensioner cost $800. "David," she tried to object when he hung up, "$800 for utilities is very much for a 1-bedroom apartment." "Emma," her husband said wearily, "Mom has an old building, no meters. They calculate by standards. Plus, she lives alone, no one nearby, so they don't economize on heat. What's unclear here? But still, $800. "Enough," David sharply cut her off. "I won't discuss every penny I spend on my mother. It's my duty, and I'm fulfilling it." On Wednesday morning, getting ready for work, Emma made a decision. She took the day off and went to her mother-in-law's building. She needed to see everything with her own eyes, gather evidence, otherwise David would never believe her. In the cafe across from Patricia's building, Emma ordered a cappuccino for $1.80, her last money until payday, and began to wait. She sat by the window, took out a book, pretended to read, but didn't take her eyes off the entrance. At 1:30 in the afternoon, the building door opened and Patricia emerged. But what a different woman she was compared to the one who'd met them on Saturday. An expensive coat of natural fur, leather boots with high heels, gold earrings the size of quarters, hair styled at a salon, professional makeup, fresh manicure. What came out of the entrance was not a poor, sick pensioner, but a wealthy lady accustomed to luxury. Emma thought with bitter irony, "This one outfit costs more than our annual salary, and we transferred $800 for utilities yesterday." Patricia got into a taxi that pulled up and drove toward downtown. Emma immediately caught another car and asked the driver to follow the first one. "A stakeout, huh?" The driver smirked. "Something like that," Emma didn't deny. The ride cost her $32 money she'd planned to spend on lunch. But that didn't matter now. What mattered was getting to the truth. The taxi stopped at a restaurant in the historic center, the Metropolitan. Emma knew this establishment from advertisements. One of the most expensive in the city. Average check per person, about $700. Patricia went inside, and Emma followed a few minutes later. The restaurant exuded an atmosphere of restrained luxury, soft lighting, fresh flowers on every table, waiters in tuxedos. This was exactly the place where people with very high incomes dined. Her mother-in-law sat at a table by the window, and the man Emma had seen on Saturday at the supermarket had already approached her. An elegant, gray-haired gentleman in an expensive suit, with a gold watch on his wrist and a signet ring on his pinky. Emma sat at a table in the far corner, ordered the cheapest salad, and began to listen. Thanks to the good acoustics of the hall, the conversation was quite audible. "Patricia, darling," the man said, "how are you feeling? How's your heart?" "Better, Tony," her mother-in-law replied, in a voice full of tenderness. "Those Swiss vitamins you brought really help." "Wonderful. And is the money enough? Last week I transferred $5,000 to your card." Emma's breath caught. $5,000 a week? That was more than their family income for 2 months. "It's enough, dear," Patricia continued. "You take such good care of me. Not like some children who only think of themselves. And how does your son help? What can he do?" Her mother-in-law waved her hand. "Small salary, greedy wife. Whatever falls my way, but it's pennies." Emma clenched her fists under the table. Pennies. $6,000 a month. That was pennies. And the greedy wife that was about her, who ate the last pasta just to help her poor mother-in-law. The waiter brought the menu, and the couple began ordering. Oysters for $320. Marble beefsteak for $480. Hennessy cognac at $240 per 50 grams. Their one lunch cost more than an ordinary person's monthly pension. "Anthony," Patricia said when the waiter left, "shall we go to the dacha this weekend? The weather's still nice. We can have a barbecue." "Of course, darling," the man agreed. "Just let's stop at the store for groceries. I want to buy you good meat, real veal." "You spoil me," her mother-in-law laughed. "But I so want to sometimes feel like a loved woman, not an old wreck." Emma listened to this conversation and felt not only indignation growing inside her, but also some strange pity. Patricia really looked happy next to this man, younger, beautiful, desired, completely unlike the pitiful old woman she presented herself as to her son. When the couple finished lunch, the bill came to $1,500 plus $300 in tips. They headed to the exit. Emma watched them go, then sat for a long time at her table, trying to make sense of what she'd seen. $5,000 a week from her lover, $6,000 a month from her son, lunches in restaurants for $1,500, mink coats and gold jewelry. And all this against the backdrop of constant complaints about poverty and illness. Emma caught a taxi and went home, feeling as if she'd been to some parallel world. Now she had proof. But what should she do with it? How could she tell David that his saintly mother lived a double life and had been deceiving them for several years? On Friday evening, another call came. Patricia's voice trembled with tears. "David, I have trouble. A pipe burst in the bathroom. I flooded the neighbors downstairs. They're demanding $8,000 in compensation. Where can I get such money? Maybe I should take a loan? I promised to pay it back little by little." David immediately panicked. "My God, Mom, of course we'll figure something out. Can't leave you in trouble." Emma listened to this conversation and thought only one thing. Another lie. Another fabrication to extort money. And David would believe again because he couldn't even suppose his mother was capable of deception. "David," she said when her husband hung up, "let's go to your mom's. Look at the damage. $8,000 is very serious. We need to assess the damage, talk to the neighbors." "Yes, you're right," David nodded. "Let's go tomorrow morning." Emma agreed, though in her heart she already knew they wouldn't find any damage, just as they wouldn't find any affected neighbors, because there'd been no flood, just as there'd been no many other emergencies they'd paid for in recent years. Tomorrow, everything will change, she thought, falling asleep. Tomorrow, David will finally learn the truth about his mother, and then they'd have to decide what to do next. With this knowledge, with this deception, with their family that was built on lies. Saturday morning began with David nervously pacing the apartment, constantly glancing at the clock. Emma watched her husband, sipping coffee from her favorite mug, and felt a strange mixture of anticipation and anxiety rising in her chest. Today, everything was supposed to change. Either her suspicions would dissipate like smoke, or the truth would finally come out. "Maybe we should call Mom first," David suggested, buttoning his jacket. "Find out how she's feeling after yesterday's nightmare." "No," Emma answered firmly. "It's better to go right away. With such serious damage, we need to act quickly." In the car, David was unusually quiet. Emma saw how he gripped the wheel with whitened knuckles, how he nervously tapped on the gearshift. $8,000 a sum that could finally bury their already modest savings for their own apartment. "David," Emma began carefully, "what if the damage isn't as serious as your mom thought? Sometimes people in panic exaggerate the scale of the problem." "Mom isn't one to panic over nothing," her husband objected. "If she says it's trouble, it really is trouble." Emma nodded, though in her heart she thought something completely different. Yes, Mom doesn't panic over nothing, she reflected. She just lies by calculation. Pulling up to the familiar house on Maple Street, they went up to the 4th floor. Patricia met them at the door in an old robe, with disheveled hair and eyes red from tears. The picture of grief was so convincing that even Emma momentarily doubted her suspicions. "David!" her mother-in-law exclaimed, throwing herself on her son's neck. "Thank goodness you came. Such trouble. I don't know what to do." "Mom, calm down." David stroked her head. "We'll solve everything. Show us what happened." Patricia led them to the bathroom, gesticulating and lamenting. "Right here, it all happened. At night, it just burst. So much water, I barely managed to turn off the valve." Emma carefully examined the room. The bathroom looked impeccable. The tile gleamed with cleanliness. The joints between tiles were neat and dry. No water stains on the ceiling or walls. The plumbing looked as if it had just been installed. No signs of leaks, corrosion, or damage. "Patricia," Emma asked, trying to make her voice sound innocent, Where exactly did the pipe burst? There, under the bath. Her mother-in-law pointed uncertainly. But the plumber already fixed everything, worked until late at night. And the floor? Emma continued questioning. There must have been a puddle. The water had to go somewhere. We wiped everything, dried it, Patricia quickly answered. A neighbor helped. We cleaned all night. Emma crouched down and carefully examined the floor under the bath. The linoleum was perfectly dry, without the slightest sign that water had been here recently. Moreover, she noticed a thin layer of dust in the corner. If there really had been a leak, the dust would have been washed away. And the plumber, where was he from? She inquired. From the management company? No, private, her mother-in-law answered, avoiding eye contact. A neighbor recommended him. Can I have his phone number? Just in case something breaks again. Patricia was confused. I didn't write it down. I was panicking. Only thought about stopping the water. David listened to this conversation and frowned. Emma saw the first notes of doubt appearing in his eyes. Mom, he said slowly, are the neighbors downstairs home? Maybe we should talk to them. Find out the extent of the damage? They left to stay with relatives, Patricia hastily answered, while repairs are going on in their apartment. And when will they return? I don't know. They didn't say. Emma stood up and resolutely headed for the exit. David, I'm going down to the neighbors. We still need to find out the details. Emma, don't, her mother-in-law protested. Why bother them? We've already caused so much inconvenience. But Emma was already going down the stairs. On the landing one floor below, she found apartment 13 and resolutely rang the bell. After a few seconds, footsteps sounded, and a woman of about 40 in a house robe opened the door. Hello, Emma politely greeted. Sorry to bother you. I live one floor up. We had a pipe burst last night. Were you flooded? The woman looked at her in surprise. Flooded? What flooding? Everything's fine with us. Nothing's leaking. Maybe yesterday evening or at night there was some leak, Emma insisted. Even a small one? No, nothing happened, the neighbor shook her head. We were home all evening watching TV. If something had been leaking, we would have noticed right away. And on the bathroom ceiling there are no stains? Maybe it's worth checking? The woman shrugged in bewilderment, but still invited Emma to look. In their bathroom, the ceiling was impeccably white, without the slightest sign of water leakage. Strange, the neighbor muttered. And upstairs there was definitely an accident? Apparently a mistake, Emma answered diplomatically. Sorry for the disturbance. Climbing back up, she found David and Patricia in a tense conversation. Her mother-in-law was heatedly explaining something to her son, waving her hands, and he listened with an increasingly grim expression. The neighbors know nothing about flooding, Emma calmly reported. Everything's fine with them. Patricia went pale. How can they know nothing? Maybe they didn't understand the question. They understood very well, Emma answered firmly, and their ceiling is completely dry. A heavy silence hung in the air. David looked back and forth between his wife and mother in confusion, while Patricia nervously fingered the edge of her robe. Mom, David said slowly, what's going on? Nothing's going on, her mother-in-law exclaimed. Maybe the neighbors just don't want problems, so they're saying everything's fine. Patricia, Emma said softly but insistently, there was no flooding, was there? Her mother-in-law's eyes darted around the room like a cornered animal. She understood the lie was exposed, but still tried to find a way out. There was flooding, just we cleaned everything up quickly. That's why there are no traces left. Mom, David took a step toward her. Tell me honestly, was there an accident or not? In his son's voice were such notes that Emma had never heard before, a mixture of pain, disappointment, and demandingness. Patricia heard these notes and understood the game was over. David, why would I lie? She tried to go on the offensive. I'm your mother. How could I deceive you? Very easily, Emma, unexpectedly for herself, answered sharply. You've been doing it for years. David looked at his wife in surprise. Emma, what do you mean? Emma took a deep breath. The time had come to lay out everything she knew. I mean, your mom isn't as poor and lonely as she seems to us. What nonsense, Patricia protested. On Wednesday, I was at that supermarket where we bought the cake, Emma continued, ignoring her mother-in-law's protests. The cashier told me interesting things. Turns out Patricia comes there every Wednesday, but not alone. Her mother-in-law's face became deathly pale. I decided to check, Emma continued. On Wednesday, I took the day off and followed your mom. David was silent, but you could see from his face he was tensely following every word. Patricia met a man at the Metropolitan restaurant. Emma took out her phone and showed the photos taken surreptitiously. Here they are together. And here's the bill for their lunch, $1,500. David took the phone with trembling hands and looked at the pictures for a long time. One showed Patricia in an expensive coat with professional makeup next to an elegant man. Another showed them sitting at a table in a luxurious restaurant. "Mom," David asked in a hoarse voice, "who is this man?" Patricia understood denying was useless. It's my acquaintance." "Acquaintance?" her son repeated. "And how long have you known each other?" 2 years, her mother-in-law barely whispered. 2 years, David repeated. "And all this time you told us you were alone as a post, that you had no one except me." "David, it's not what you think," Patricia tried to justify herself. "And what do I think?" Her son exploded. "I think you've been lying to us for 2 years. Lying about your loneliness, lying about poverty, lying about not having money." "I really don't have money," her mother-in-law exclaimed. "Oh, really?" Emma remarked sarcastically. "And the mink coat for $500,000, what's that? And lunches in restaurants for $1,500? And gold jewelry?" "He gives all that." Patricia weakly justified herself. "Who is he?" David demanded. "Anthony Mitchell," Emma answered, instead of her mother-in-law. "City council member, owner of a construction company, net worth estimated at $200 million. David looked at his mother as if seeing her for the first time. "And this millionaire supports you?" "He doesn't support me," Patricia objected. "He just helps, sometimes." Emma took out the notebook with notes from the overheard conversation. $5,000 a week, that's sometimes helps?" David grabbed his head. $5,000 a week? That's $20,000 a month." He paused. "And while," Emma continued mercilessly, "she extracts $6,000 from us every month, cries about poverty, asks for money for medicines, for utilities, for urgent needs." "Mom," David sat on the couch and covered his face with his hands. "How could you?" "David, I didn't want to deceive anyone," Patricia cried. Just, I wanted both you to help your mother and him to help his beloved woman." "So you decided to get money from 2 sources?" Emma clarified. "And what's wrong with that?" her mother-in-law unexpectedly exclaimed, moving from justifications to offense. "David is my son. He's obligated to help his mother. And Anthony is my man. He also should provide for his beloved woman. But why lie?" David didn't understand. "You could have honestly said, 'I have a friend, but I want my son to help too.'" Patricia fell silent, understanding she'd fallen into a trap of her own words. "Would you have agreed to help knowing she has a rich lover?" Emma quietly asked her husband. David was silent for a long time, then honestly answered, "Probably not." "You see," Patricia said triumphantly, "and I wanted support for my son. That's normal." "Normal to lie and deceive?" Emma protested. "Normal to make us live in poverty while you dine in restaurants." "I didn't make anyone," her mother-in-law snapped. "Nobody forced you to help." "Didn't force?" Emma felt fury boiling inside her. And the constant tears on the phone? And the stories about how without our money you'd die of hunger? And this yesterday's performance with the flooding? David raised his head and looked at his mother. "Mom, how many more such emergency situations were there that didn't really exist?" Patricia didn't answer, but you could see from her face there'd been many such stories. "I calculated," Emma said. "Over 2 years, we gave you about $1 million. $1 million. David stood and approached the window, looked at the courtyard for a long time in silence. Emma saw how tense his shoulders were, how clenched his fists were. Finally, he turned to his mother. "Mom, I'm asking for the last time. Are you ready to return at least part of the money you took by deception?" "What money?" Patricia tensed. "You helped voluntarily." "Voluntarily, but based on false information," Emma objected. "We thought we were helping a poor, sick woman, but in reality we were sponsoring an affluent lady's entertainment." "I don't owe you anything," her mother-in-law flared up. "Those were gifts from son to mother." "Fine," David nodded with some terrible calmness. "Then this son won't be making any more gifts." "What do you mean?" Patricia began to worry. "I mean, from today, everything's finished between us," David said. And in his voice was neither anger nor resentment, only weariness. "No money, no groceries, no visits. Live with your millionaire." "David, you can't do this," her mother-in-law exclaimed. And for the first time in the entire conversation, real fear sounded in her voice. "I'm your mother." "You were my mother," David corrected her. "And now you're just a woman who deceived me for 2 years for money." Patricia understood she was losing her main source of income and quickly tried to return to her familiar role. "Son, I didn't want to upset you. I was just afraid you'd stop helping if you found out about Anthony." "And I was right." David nodded. "I would have stopped, because it's stupid to feed a person who gets $20,000 a month from a lover." Her mother-in-law tried to approach her son, but he stepped back. "Don't, Mom. Everything's been said." "David, think again," Patricia pleaded. "After all, I really am your mother. Are you really going to, because of money, lose your family?" "It's not me losing family because of money," her son answered. "It's you who lost it 2 years ago when you decided your son could be a source of income along with your lover." Emma took her husband's arm. "David, let's go home." They headed to the exit, but at the very door Patricia called out, "Wait, fine, I'll return part of the money. A third of what you gave, 300,000. David stopped without turning around. "When?" "Within a month, in parts." Her mother-in-law answered after a pause. "Anthony promised to give me a large sum soon. I'll return it from that." David turned and looked carefully at his mother. "Fine, but there are conditions. From today, no requests for help, no calls with complaints about life, no emergency situations. If you return the money, we'll occasionally communicate like distant relatives. If not..." "If not?" Patricia asked quietly. "If not, I repeat, consider that you never had a son." The drive home passed in complete silence. David drove with a stone face, occasionally swallowing as if trying to swallow a lump stuck in his throat. Emma sat nearby and felt waves of pain, disappointment, and some inner emptiness coming from her husband. Outside the window, gray October streets flashed by, and the whole world suddenly seemed different, more honest, but also crueler. Only when they went up to their apartment and David collapsed on the couch, covering his face with his hands, did Emma dare to speak. "David, how do you feel?" He was silent for a long time, then said in a hoarse voice, "Like the closest person betrayed me." "No, didn't betray, used me. For 2 years used my love against me." Emma sat next to him and carefully touched his shoulder. David didn't pull away, but didn't respond to the touch either. He just sat, immersed in his thoughts. "You know what's most striking?" he continued without raising his head. "Not that she lied about money, but how easily it came to her. Every call, every tear, every story about another disaster, it was all a performance. And I believed. God, how I believed." "You believed because you loved," Emma said quietly. "It's hard to suppose a family member is capable of such things." David finally raised his head and looked at his wife. "And you? You must be in shock too," Emma thought. Indeed, how did she feel? There was anger, of course, and relief that the truth finally came out. But there was also a strange emptiness in the place where hatred for her mother-in-law used to live. "You know," she said slowly, "I actually feel sorry for her. Imagine how scary it is to live constantly lying, remembering who you said what to, making sure not to get confused in your own lies." "Sorry?" David was surprised. "After everything she did to us?" "Yes, sorry. She's actually unhappy. She has no real closeness with either you or this Anthony. With you, she plays the role of a poor old woman. With him, the role of a kept woman. Where is the real her?" David thoughtfully shook his head. "I don't know. Maybe she's forgotten herself what she's really like." In the following days, life began to improve with surprising speed. For the first time in 2 years, free money appeared in their family budget, those same $6,000 a month that used to go to Patricia. Emma opened a savings account, and they began putting money away for their own apartment. "Imagine," she told David over dinner, "if we save $5,000 a month, in a year we'll have $60,000. And that's already a decent down payment for a mortgage." "Yes," her husband nodded, but there was no enthusiasm in his voice. "It just feels strange to be happy about money that came at such a price." Emma understood his feelings. David couldn't just forget about his mother, cross her out of his heart with one stroke. A mother's love, even if deceived and used, doesn't disappear in one day. A week after the exposure, Patricia called. The familiar name appeared on the screen, and Emma saw her husband tense. "Should I answer?" he asked, looking at the phone. "It's your decision," Emma replied. David pressed the answer button but didn't speak, just silently held the phone to his ear. "David," came the familiar voice. but now without the usual plaintive intonations. "It's Mom. I'm listening," her son answered shortly. "I wanted to say I transferred the first $5,000 to your card this morning." David checked his phone and nodded to Emma. The money had indeed come through. "Good," he said into the phone. "Received." "David, can I say one more thing?" "Go ahead. I understand you're angry with me. You probably have the right. I just want you to know I didn't think I was doing anything wrong. It seemed to me I had a right to help from both my son and Anthony." "You do have a right," David agreed, "but to honest help, not based on lies." "Yes, you're right. But you see, if I'd told you about Anthony right away, you would have decided his money was enough for me." "And I would have been right," her son interrupted. $20,000 a month is enough for a comfortable life even in the capital." Patricia fell silent, then quietly asked, "Will we ever see each other again?" David thought for a long time, then answered, "I don't know, Mom. I don't know right now." After this conversation, he was depressed all evening. Emma saw her husband was having a hard time but didn't know how to help. On one hand, Patricia really was his mother, and the break caused him pain. On the other hand, returning to the former relationship would mean agreeing to further deception. A month later, the second portion of money came another $5,000. This time, Patricia simply transferred it without a call or explanations. David looked at the bank notification and smiled sadly. "At least she keeps her word." "Yes," Emma agreed. "You can't take that from her." By December, amazing changes had occurred in their lives. For the first time in 3 years, they were planning to celebrate New Year, not at home in front of the TV, but somewhere at a resort. For the first time, they had money for quality food, for updating their wardrobe, for those little joys of life they could only dream about before. "You know," Emma said, counting their savings, "we already have almost $20,000 in the account. If things continue like this, by summer we can seriously think about a mortgage." "Yes," David nodded. "It just feels strange somehow to be happy that we stopped feeding my mother." "We didn't stop feeding your mother," Emma objected. "We stopped sponsoring an affluent woman's entertainment. Those are different things." The third payment came in January. Now Patricia had returned $150,000 of the promised $300. Along with the transfer came a short message. "Happy New Year, Mom." David looked at his phone screen for a long time, then showed the message to his wife. "What do you think should I respond?" "Decide for yourself," Emma said. "I don't want to pressure you." "I'll respond," David decided. "After all, she is my mother." He typed a short message. "Thanks. Happy New Year to you, too." February brought the last transfer. $300,000 out of $1 million, not much, but better than nothing. The message with the transfer had a note. "Can't give more. Anthony's become more economical." Emma read the message and snorted. There's her loving millionaire. As soon as she understood she needed to economize, immediately can't give more. "Maybe he really can't," David defended her. "Who knows what's going on with them?" "David," Emma said softly, "do you still feel sorry for her?" Her husband thought. "You know, I don't feel sorry. I just understand she's also a person with her own weaknesses, fears, desires. Yes, she acted despicably, but she's not a monster." "No, not a monster," Emma agreed. "Just a very selfish person who got used to living at others' expense." Spring came with unexpected news. David was promoted at work, offered a higher position with a salary 1.5 times more than before. Emma also received an offer to move to a larger company. "Imagine," she rejoiced. "If we both agree, our combined income will almost double. And considering we're not spending money on your mom—" "Stop," David interrupted. "Don't say not spending on Mom. Say not spending on her entertainment. It's easier for me that way." Emma understood her husband still reacted painfully to this topic and didn't return to it again. In May, they submitted documents for a mortgage. The down payment was $500,000, a sum they could only dream about before. The bank approved the loan, and they began choosing an apartment. 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom? David asked, scrolling through listings. 3-bedroom, Emma answered decisively. 1 room for a nursery? 2nd bedroom, 3rd living room. A normal family apartment. Nursery. They didn't say it aloud, but both understood now that the financial question was resolved. They could think about children. Before, the thought of a baby was frightening. What would they support it on if all the money went to his mother? Now, that problem didn't exist. In summer, they moved. A new apartment in a modern building with good layout and a view of the park. Their own apartment, bought with their own money, without help from parents and without debts to anyone. On moving day, David stood on the balcony with a glass of wine, watching the sunset. Emma approached him and hugged his shoulders. "What are you thinking about? About how a year ago I considered myself a bad son if I couldn't give my mother money for medicine. And today we have our own apartment, savings in the account, plans for the future. Do you regret what happened?" David was silent for a long time, then shook his head. "No. I'm sorry Mom turned out not to be the person I thought she was. But I don't regret learning the truth. The lies would have come out sooner or later anyway, and we would have lost even more time and money." In August, the last message from Patricia came. Short, without explanations. Anthony married someone else. If anything changes in our relationship, write. David showed the message to his wife. "What do you say?" "Your decision as always," Emma answered. "But remember, if you're ready to resume the relationship, then only on honest terms. Without lies, without extortion, without performances. And if she really needs help now, then we'll help. But first we'll make sure the need is real, not another performance." David nodded and put away his phone without responding to the message. Not responding yet. In the fall, exactly a year after that memorable day at the supermarket, Emma found out she was pregnant. Standing in the bathroom of their new apartment and looking at the 2 lines on the test, she thought about how their life had changed. A year ago, they lived in a rented 1-bedroom, scraped by from paycheck to paycheck, gave most of their income to support a lying mother-in-law. Today, they had their own apartment, stable income, savings in the bank, and a baby in her womb. "David," she called to her husband. "Come here." He entered, saw her face, and immediately understood. "Pregnant?" "Yes," Emma nodded. "Think we can handle it?" David hugged her and laughed quietly. "Now we can. Now we have everything necessary. Honesty with each other, our own home, and money for a decent life." That same evening, David sat for a long time with his phone in his hands, looking at the message from his mother. Finally, he typed a response. "Mom, we're going to have a baby. If you want to be a grandmother, and not just a stranger who once deceived me, I invite you for a conversation. An honest conversation, without tears, without lies, without requests for money. Think about whether you're ready for such communication." The answer came in an hour. "Ready. Congratulations on the future, baby." Emma read the exchange and smiled. "Maybe we can still build a normal relationship?" "Maybe," David agreed, "but only on our terms, terms of honesty and mutual respect. Time will tell if Mom is capable of such a relationship." Outside the window of their new apartment, the lights of the evening city burned, and life seemed full of possibilities. Possibilities for honesty, for love, for a real family, one built not on deception and manipulation, but on truth and mutual support.